to have this conversation today with Georgios. And some of you may already know about Axelar, but I think a really great way to find out what they're doing and why what they're doing is really special and core to the idea of accelerating growth. I'll just let Georgios give you a bit of an idea of why they're sort of conquering the world in the interoperability space.
Yeah, first of all, thank you so much for having me, Beniamin. We've been talking for a while, but it's the first time to meet in person, so really excited to be here. Thanks everyone for joining. Let me start by framing the problem we're solving and why it's important, right? So, as you all know, today there's many different blockchains that optimize for different things, right? Ethereum, the EVM, was the first VM to ever launch. It was a massive innovation and allowed developers to really build anything you can conceive, any application you can conceive, you can now build on top of a blockchain. But Ethereum itself and the Ethereum virtual machine has many limitations, right? It forces you to write in a certain language, it does not scale enough, and that's why recently we saw the emergence of many different blockchains, MultiversX being an excellent example, that give developers optionality. And to scale the space, we really have high conviction that there's going to be hundreds of blockchains. And the reason is simple. If the space succeeds, there's going to be hundreds of real-world applications that are going to live on the blockchain. And those are not going to be able to scale on a single blockchain. For every single application, we're going to need a different blockchain. And in a world of hundreds of blockchains, we have scalability, but we do not have usability, right? Because let's imagine a user has an asset on something like Polygon, but they want to use an application on MultiversX. You will have to have multiple wallets today. You will have to bridge. It's a very cumbersome process. So interoperability is really about breaking down these barriers of fragmentation and making Web3 usable in a multi-chain world.
And this goes back to our point, and maybe the key of this conversation, which is if we want to succeed, we need to start from the standpoint of how the internet, the web, will look like, where everything around blockchains is just embedded in the internet, and people don't really care what blockchain is it on. They only care that it works, that it's fast, almost instant, inexpensive, and the usability makes sense, that it's not an obstacle. And so we've discussed what are some of the paths of reaching that point and how we can accelerate that path, because it's one thing for this to happen in 50 years, and a very, very different thing to happen for it to happen in 1 or 2 years, or right now. So the whole point is, one strategy is collaborating with some of the biggest partners in the world on some specific directions and finding the best of them with which we can immediately accelerate things. This is why interoperability essentially is the one thing that enables builders to reach the audiences and to not care about the obstacles that they would normally come across. So I'm very curious a bit how Axelar maybe works or solves this idea and why it's really special for the blockchain space.
That's great. First of all, I really like the framing with the internet, and an analogy that has been around in the space for a while is that interoperability is really the internet of blockchains. It's very easy to see each single blockchain as a world computer. Everyone can program an application on top of it the same way you can program an application on your MacBook. But then, MacBooks would not be as usable if you could not communicate with other people, send emails, make payments, browse the web. And the analogy we make is interoperability technology is the internet of blockchains, right? So I really like this framing. And before we talk about Axelar, just to quantify a little bit the importance of interoperability technology, right? And if you look at how people use blockchains today and how people use applications today in general, right? You're going to go on your phone, you're going to send a message on WhatsApp, maybe then you make a payment, you send an email, you browse the internet. Typically, you're going to do a few transactions of every application, and then you're going to move on to the next application. And it's the same thing for blockchains. Maybe you go do a swap on Uniswap, then you go on Aave, take a loan, maybe take a few loans, go buy an NFT. Typically, what we see is that the user is going to do maybe 3 transactions, and then move to the next application. And these are all cross-application transactions. And in a world where the major applications are going to be on their own state machines, on their own blockchains, every third or fourth transaction is going to be a cross-chain transaction, which means that like 25% of every blockchain transaction is going to be cross-chain. Right? And we have to make those transactions so seamless that users don't have to think about cross-chain, they don't have to think about which blockchains they use. Only the developers should know that they're using MultiversX or Solana or Bitcoin or Ethereum. That should all be completely abstracted away from the user. Right? So interoperability and the technology we're building with Axelar is not really about any novel use cases. It's about making existing use cases, applications, usable in this multi-chain paradigm. And just to talk a little bit about how Axelar in particular solves this problem, we started about 3.5 years ago. Together with my co-founder, we were both part of the founding team for the Algorand project out of MIT. And once we launched this blockchain, we recognized how hard it is to onboard users and developers to a new platform. That was around like 2019, 2020. Most of the users were on Ethereum, but they all wanted to onboard to the chain, but there was no bridging solution, there was nothing, right? There were not even stable coins on the platform, and we realized how strong interoperability is going to be, how powerful, and we decided to build Axelar as a solution that solved this problem for the wider ecosystem. So if you're an application, a blockchain developer, you want to launch a new chain, you can very easily get access to users from any other blockchain, right? So that was like the core fundamental idea for Axelar. And then we realized, okay, it's not about novel applications, it's just about making new blockchains usable, and that's how we got started. And now at the time, if you look at the interoperability space from back then, there were all kinds of bridges, right? There were all these like kind of centralized bridges that were operating like a custodian. And their thinking was they want to go to market fast, capture the developers, capture the users, and then decentralize the actual infrastructure below, right? You probably remember things like, the Harmony bridge, the Ronin bridge, multi-chain more recently. Multi-chain was working for like 3 or 4 years, fine, but the underlying infrastructure was very centralized, right? The founder was holding all the keys. So, please go ahead.
That never ends well, with the founders holding the keys, and then it works for 2 years, and then when it becomes large enough, such that hackers really put the effort and resources to find the hole, they always find the hole. But I think the entire point of our conversation goes back to this idea that if we can onboard the next billion users, then everything changes. All the applications have a different market. All the builders have a different target audience they can address and serve and so forth. And the only question that we really care deeply about is what other strategies are there in addition to, for instance, building the infrastructure that really scales and then building the UX that's so simple and compelling that enables the users to actually interact with whatever applications they want. And it seems that interoperability, however long you zoom out, it's super clear that there is no way around it. So unless this is embedded in the internet, just as the simple interoperability between any other protocol that we have right now, it seems like we will just stale the entire adoption for years just because we've not learned the lesson. And then as soon as we enable this type of interaction, it almost also seems that a lot of users will discover different use cases, different experiences, and different benefits that might not be obvious for them, that might shift in a very different way than you would think. So you might think that initially there's a stage at which there's fragmentation. There's an initial stage of, let's say, interoperability with bridges and so forth. But then it's hard to think that what you'll have is use cases on every blockchain when actually the trade-offs are really high. So unless you have some really high constraints, it might be that after you have interoperability and easy flow between any other chain, you might see a huge concentration that was not obvious or was counterintuitive at first in one particular chain. So I'm curious a bit how you see this type of adoption, how many, let's say, users you've seen playing with the technologies before you started Axelar, even with your experience with Algorand and all of that, and how have you seen experience and implications shift since Axelar, especially with ecosystems like Cosmos or some of the other ecosystems where this bridge literally connects 50 or 100 islands that otherwise would be segregated without users passing from one island to the other. Very, very curious to hear a bit your thoughts.
Yeah, I think in terms of adoption, because the technology was built is really recent, right? Before Axelar, we only had those bridges that just work for asset transfers. We only launched the more generalizable cross-chain messaging platform that people can truly build seamless cross-chain experiences on. That only launched recently. So I wouldn't say most of the exciting use cases have launched yet, but we can actually think through how interoperability would transform some of the existing use cases, right? And I'm really curious here. I know with MultiversX, you have built a full stack solution, right? Like, and even internally, right, you built, I believe, a wallet that has an excellent user experience, and there's so many primitives built in your ecosystem. So my question to you is, what's the most, or maybe one of the most exciting applications built on MultiversX? And then we can talk a little bit about how interoperability makes this particular application more usable.
It is, interestingly enough, xPortal, I would say, just because it's a collection of application, precisely because, I'm not sure if you've seen the presentation yesterday, everything you've seen in xPortal before when we had the conversation has just gone to a completely new level with cards, with on-ramps, with all of that. So now you have crypto, you have cash and the elements around that, but you also have this hub that enables a very simple onboarding in any application with identity, with wallet that you can interact just with one tap. So I'm very curious to hear, for instance, how xPortal could be taken to the next level through Axelar.
Okay, let's talk about an example here. I'm completely making this up. Hope it applies to your product. Let's say you have tokenized some real estate on your platform, right? And the user there has onboarded their identity as well. It's a gated process. You need to do KYC to participate, right? And the user holds some of these assets on the MultiversX platform. Now, you have some asset as a user on a different blockchain, like Ethereum, right? And or actually, let's say you want to sell to a user that lives on a different platform, right? You hold your asset on the MultiversX platform. The user holds some USDC on Ethereum mainnet. Effectively, what will happen is that the MultiversX user will just have to onboard to the xPortal wallet. The other user may have MetaMask on Ethereum. The two users will be able to interact without the MultiversX user ever having to use MetaMask, without the Ethereum user even having to use xPortal. Now, ideally, every user will have to onboard to xPortal and can be a major wallet.
That's it. Thank you. I'm also going to just take one example, and then maybe we'll come to the important milestone that we reached today, especially with an important collaboration that we've been working on for some time together. Taking one of the, let's say, largest applications or fields that we've seen built on blockchains, DeFi. How do you think DeFi is supercharged through Axelar, especially with everything we have right now on Ethereum, on some of the other chains? Have you seen some change in behavior or users thinking about some other things that were not previously possible before Axelar?
So again, I want to emphasize that cross-chain is not about new use cases. It's about making existing use cases seamless in a multi-chain world. And I think a pivotal moment here is going to come in 2-3 weeks with the launch of the DYDX chain. Now, DYDX chain decided to spin out from Ethereum and launch their own blockchain because they wanted to customize it, they want to scale faster. But this blockchain is an island, right? It's completely fragmented from the rest of the world. And the collaboration we have with them is enabling seamless onboarding to their chain. So we're actually going to work with them in 2 different stages, have 2 different flows. The first flow is going to be onboarding to the DYDX chain. So if you have an asset on the 50+ chains that are connected to Axelar today, you will be able, with 1 click from your wallet, deposit any asset to the DYDX chain. The second step that we're hopefully going to launch at some point next year is directly interacting with the DYDX application on the DYDX chain without even having a wallet on DYDX. So you're going to be a user on BNB, you're going to open the application of DYDX, you're going to say, I want to open a position, the wallet is going to track where your asset lives, and you're going to be able to directly access the application. So we're abstracting away completely the multi-chain, we're abstracting away bridging, we're abstracting away everything. And I feel like this is really like a big application that a lot of people use. And once people experiment with it, they're going to get excited about cross-chain, they will understand what it's all about, and this will inspire the next wave of developers to build true cross-chain applications.
And I will come to the point that we've started with, namely that the most important thing is how do we accelerate adoption? How do we bring more users? And there are several paths to this. One path is to just connect to the biggest platforms in the world. Try to make the technology more accessible, simpler, and just give the billions of users that already have access to those platforms access to the tools around blockchains. And this we've shared a bit, and we're moving forward with that. But a different path that's complementary to everything we were discussing is precisely what Georgios has been discussing. And I'm very, very curious, one, how many chains you have currently integrated, how many, maybe 2, 3 stats that you think are the most remarkable, and then perhaps we discuss a bit what's the most exciting thing of what we're building together.
So as of this week, there's 50 chains connected to Axelar, Scroll being the most recent one. So that's what's nice about Axelar's integration model is because we did not take the shortcuts that many of the other players took, where they basically had the founders holding the keys. As we talked about, we actually created a decentralized validator set that is responsible for all messaging passing across chains. So I think one remarkable stat is that right now we have a permissionless set of validators. There's 75 validators on the Axelar network. I think the second closest competitor is Wormhole with 19 validators. So we're the most decentralized by far on the market, and decentralization is really the key that can prevent the most common attack vector, right? I believe just last year in interoperability, around $2 billion were stolen because of centralization. So this is something we started to tackle from the early days. And because we built this decentralized validator set, we actually architected Axelar as a blockchain itself. So we have a blockchain. Its sole purpose is to facilitate interoperability across other blockchains. And because of that, it's very easy to add new blockchains to our network. We offer many-to-many connectivity, where if you connect MultiversX to Axelar, through Axelar you can route messages to any other chain, right? So what's existing today or before Axelar is a pairwise model where you have to make these connections one by one, and it would have to scale quadratically. So if you want to have 50 chains, you need like thousands of connections on the back end, and this gets harder and harder as time goes on. But with Axelar's model, we are working together now to create a connection with MultiversX. Once that is live very, very soon, you are going to be able to communicate with MultiversX and any of the other 50 blockchains that we have in the Axelar ecosystem, right? So, woo!
So, just to emphasize this, for some time, we've been discussing a lot with the different players within the entire blockchain ecosystem, looking for some of the partners with which we could accelerate this type of adoption and enable people from MultiversX or from other blockchains to cross bridges without having to worry about security, without having to worry about obstacles in user experience. And the entire metaphor that I'll come back to over and over again is we might have the best island in the world. The island where it's literally a paradise. You have a lot of fun, everything works, it's awesome. But if you're in the middle of the ocean and you cannot move away or leave that island, then there's no point in being on that paradise sort of alone. This is why interoperability is key, because it opens the bridges not with one chain, but with 50 chains and then hundreds of chains. And this should be the default within the ecosystem so that we can really say the technology is embedded in the web and it enables millions, then tens of millions, hundreds of millions, and billions of users. So again, we're truly excited to announce that with Axelar, we've been working for a very long time now to make this bridge available, and probably in the next few weeks, we'll have some conversations on how this will go out, test it with all of you. But it's really great to have you here to announce this together, and very much looking forward to the next integrations that then will bring even more blockchains to this new standard that enables more users to interact.